Hi, I'm Charlene Bowden, the founder and president of It's Just Us Productions. The 2020 pandemic has shifted our production schedule, but it has not changed our mission to share information that impacts our communities. My sincere thanks again to all of you who continue to support the It's Just Us radio show, and I hope you'll stay with us over the next few weeks as we bring you these virtual conversations. Also, visit our website at IJUproductions.com for updates on our other shows. Feelings of hopelessness, cries for leadership, uncertainties. These are just a few plagues that have impacted our world. Historically, the church has been a beacon of light at the intersection of religion or faith and social justice. Yet there are parishioners who are still struggling to understand just how to respond in these times. How do parishioners continue to move, possibly with fear? So I wanted to talk to one of my favorite preacher teachers, Pastor Zichri Osler, the associate pastor of Light of the World Christian Tabernacle International here in Stockbridge, Georgia. Pastor Zichri serves or has served in the strategic planning ministry, worship arts ministry, TV video ministry, and the youth ministry. Pastor, it is so good to see you. How are you and your family doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to be here. As my son sneaks up behind me, it's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. It's a family affair. I love it.
Right. Right.
Oh, it's all good. That's what we do. So I'm going to ask a loaded question. I know it's a loaded question. We've seen some extremes this year. We've seen hurricanes, economic crisis, wildfires, a pandemic, racial injustices.
Right.
Pastor, what's your perspective on what's happening?
I think honestly, if we maintain faith, we should be fine. I'm not one who thinks that this is the manifestation of God's wrath. I do think that if we stay vigilant, though, we will see God's hand moving, even in his grace, through all these things. A lot of times the church doesn't like to get involved in a lot of conflict. However, some conflict is good. When you read the Old Testament, especially when you're talking about the racial injustice, I'm always reminded of the book of Exodus. God uses trouble to rise or raise up a people of his own. And so while I don't necessarily think that God's wrath is moving against the nation, I do think that God is calling his people to make a stand and to make a assured stand and to not be on the fence. A lot of these social issues are they're so divisive to where if you straddle the fence, it's a decision within itself. We're in a time where if you say, I don't have a stance, then you pretty much made your stance. And so, that's a good thing, because honestly, we can't grow to the nation that we have called ourselves to be until we start dealing with some of the issues that have been here all along.
Exactly. And so why, in your opinion, do you believe that there is that straddling of the fence? Why does the parishioners seem to be confused, in your opinion?
I think we mistake, how do I want to say this? We mistake the grace and the meekness and the gentleness and all those good things of God, but we misapply them. Jesus says, be as innocent as a dove, but then he also says, be as shrewd as a serpent.
Yes.
And so if you're going to try to be as shrewd as a dove and as innocent as a dove, you're going to find yourself in a lot of situations where you had no business finding yourself in. Also, Jesus says he comes for divisiveness. We like to read the kind words of Jesus Christ, but we don't really read the words that stir up action. Jesus says, I don't come for peace. Jesus says, I come to divide son against father, and I come to divide mother against daughter. I've come to, there has to be a separation. And so, while it is uncomfortable, it's not really I think a lot of today's churches get caught up in what's going to grow my church. It's not something that's going to grow your church, perhaps, but it is something that is going to cause righteousness on the land. And sometimes in an attempt to keep the peace, we also try to maintain status quo. And when status quo is out of righteousness, then it is no longer time to try to keep that peace. It's time to stir the sea, stir the waters a little bit.
Yeah, because the waters are troubled already. So,
Right.
Both feet in or both feet out.
But
That's dangerous in the middle there.
right.
We want to talk about Christians running for political office. I've heard it said that a person can't truly be a Christian and be a politician. It's like you just cannot do both. But, the church can be vocal when it pertains to things that seem to be immoral, right?
Right.
In your opinion, what needs to happen to encourage more faith-based citizens or Christians to run for office, especially in the local elections?
First of all, let me say Pastor Warnock is running for Senate. That's one name that comes to mind. And it's a pleasure to see him running. I think one of the things that has to happen is we have to get rid of that mindset that because you're a pastor, you can't be a politician, or because you're a person of faith, that you can't be a politician. That's not true. I think politics are called to serve people. And I think the spirit pastor is called to serve people. Now you're going to do those things totally different. You're talking to two different things, but that doesn't mean that because you're spirit led that it disqualifies you from politics. And while they do have differences, for instance, I'm not one that thinks you should marry or muddy your politics with your faith. I think that's where a lot of trouble comes. People don't know how to negotiate those differences. And so because I'm a man of faith, where do I stand with pro-life versus pro-choice? Or because I'm a man of faith, where do I stand on whatever divisive issues? However, as long as the politician comes to serve every man, we say we're the United States of America, so we have to make sure that we serve every man. We can't stand for issues that are going to be divisive or that will scapegoat one people versus another. But you can do that as a pastor and stand in total integrity. The God of the preacher is the God of the pimp. The God of the worshiper is also the God of a backslider. And that is an easy way to bring grace among the land. We say we're people of God, but then we don't want to be called in positions that will definitely bring forth grace. Going back, I don't know why I'm stayed on Moses, but not just Moses, but also Joseph. These are people who are called of God and are put in positions not just of power in church. Moses didn't have a church, but Moses was definitely called to raise a people. Joseph didn't have a church, but Joseph was second ranked in the land a couple of times. And through God's grace, through God's wisdom, through God's favor, he was able to bring forth salvation, not just spiritual salvation, but also a tangible salvation to the people. And so I would encourage pastors, you don't have to lock yourself into only, and when I say lock yourself into, I don't want to make that a negative connotation, neither do I want to minimize the importance of the spirit. But you don't want to lock yourself into just one position. You can serve everyone. Joseph, in his serving of Egypt, he served people that weren't even his own. And so you can be a pastor and serve communities that have nothing to do with your church and bring grace around among the land.
And I think that's one of the things that this time has created opportunity to do that. We've always had some version of online ministry. We've seen it progress like exponentially, of course, throughout the course of time. So we've seen more church happening outside of the walls. As you mentioned, Moses didn't have the building, the infrastructure, but there was still a ministry that needed to happen to the people. What is the call to action for the church now that so much of ministry is happening outside of those walls? What can that look like?
I really think virtual church is going to be the new church. I think it's going to be the new church. Sadly, there are a lot of churches, and I'm not one to point fingers at churches, but sadly, there are a lot of churches who weren't on that boat soon enough. And then when the pandemic occurred, they were caught off balance. However, it's not too late to transform. It is not too late to make that adjustment. This is going to be the new wave, I believe. Especially you're dealing with the generation coming up who is used to everything being within an hour and 30 minutes, or within an hour or 30 minutes. You know, we serve a generation now who lives in their pocket. You know, their phone is their life. And so if you're not going to be able to reach out to them into their world, then you're going to have issues when it comes to reaching people to the optimal level that you're called to reach people at. A lot of times in church, because we have the standard, we have the spiritual barometer that we call people to, then we sort of can forsake how we then can be adjustable or flexible in coming to people. But we have to reach people where they are. Otherwise, it will not be the people that will grow obsolete, but it will be the church that will grow obsolete. And even in this pandemic, you know, you're seeing the churches that are really thriving, the churches that are really maintaining, keeping their heads above the waters, are the churches that have been able to make that shift and do that shift seamlessly, and to embrace that change. You don't want to be disgruntled in making that change, because what happens is God shows himself in one way and in one form, in one platform. But then in a new way, in a new form, in a new platform, God will show himself the same way. And so as people of faith, we have to make sure that we maintain that same faith, knowing that God can still reach people in a Zoom call. God can still reach people on Facebook Live. God can still reach people however it may be. And it does not necessarily have to be in your sanctuary. And I'm not by any means knocking meeting in your sanctuary. We shouldn't forsake coming together. There's definitely an energy that occurs when we come together. However, we must advance with the times, and we must show sensitivity to the times. There are some people who this is the way, this is their convenience, but then there are other people just because of the times, this is what they're going to have to do. It's what's healthy for them, and so we have to meet them where they are. And in meeting them where they are, I promise things will come together just as fine, even if it's in a new way.
Yes, that's because of his faithfulness, not because of anything that we get
right
here. You know,
right.
And, you know, there are many ministries that really never close their doors. You know, January to today, they've kept their doors open. Yet there are other ones who congregants have, they decided rather, that they're not going to go back into the building this year. Why do you feel or believe that there's such varying beliefs around that?
Yes. Unfortunately, especially given specifically, I'm speaking towards the coronavirus, it's been politicized in a way to where it's almost made into a black or white issue. When this issue is a lot more complex to me in regards to going forward with the new steps of going forward. Put it like that. I'm not one to say we should close everything down. Neither am I one to say we should open everything up. And so there are some churches who can definitely maintain reopening while also maintaining social distancing. There are other ministries who are either they're just too big or their facilities are too small to really manage that in an effective way. And so, you know, if you're dealing with a super contagious virus and you have a mega ministry, well, then that's a hotbed for spread, you know. Whereas if you're a ministry with, let's say, a fairly nice sized church, but your membership is at a level where you can manage to reopen and still social distance. For instance, the church where I serve, the Light of the World, right now we're open, but it is in a way where it's definitely social distance. We're not seating people on every row. We're seating people on every other row, and they're not sitting next to each other. There's 2 and 3 seats between the people on the same row. So now we're talking about maybe filling the church to 20% capacity of what it's actually filled. Well, I mean, that sounds like it's a little, but when you're opened up the pandemic and you're preaching and singing to empty chairs, that's encouraging. You have people who really do want to come in and minister with another. So if you can open your space, I think that's a great thing. Now, for those ministries that are choosing to not open whatsoever, God bless you. I understand it and I agree with it in many instances. You have to maintain safety. You have to maintain safety. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people think we're on the back end of this pandemic. However, we're about to walk into cold and flu season where coughing and sneezing is the norm. And so, you have this contagion going on with that. I would not be surprised to see even churches where I serve, churches like where I serve, where you begin to see another scale back for a minute to make sure we gauge where we're going. By all means, the ministry is a focus, but if you're not serving the man and the healthiness of the man, you can't put the interest of the church ahead of the interest of the people. And so, wherever your leaders are, whoever your leaders are, as long as they're making decisions that also include what's your best interest, I think you should stick with those decisions, whether it be to open or to slow open, or to close. I think those decisions should be left to not just the pastors, but also the parishioners, also the members.
Got that. Thank you. And you touched on this briefly. I want to pull it out a little bit more. So I chose to call it, use the scripture rather, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from him. We all know that scripture in some version. So when I was growing up, this scripture not only referred to creating the foundation of faith, belief in God, but it also included attending church on a regular basis, right? So our children, we have children now who, and as you mentioned, I think young adults, that this is it. This is what they know. This is what they've known.
Right.
So what are some ideas or some ways that you can think of and share on how we engage that population of people, both inside the walls and outside the walls?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. I recently just shared with our men in regards to how to keep people engaged in ministry. And by no means do I want to use your radio show to give a lesson, but these points they really help. And I encourage them when you're trying to keep people engaged in ministry, one of the main things that you want to do is to make sure that the people feel like they're needed. A lot of times we'll have ministries where all of the needs are centered around what the ministry needs, what the driving force or whatever sub-ministry, what they need. But if the people don't feel needed, then if I'm not feeling, and it's not even a personal thing, it's just the human nature. If I don't feel like I'm needed in the area, it calls for less commitment. I feel like it can go on without me. I don't feel like I'm integral in its operations. There's no personal utility that is really coming out from serving in there. So number one, you have to create a need, and not just a need for the ministry, a need for the person. Like, make sure people understand, we need you. You are important. You are an important part of this ministry thriving. Where people feel needed, they'll be committed. But then number two, you have to make sure that people also nurtured. Create platforms where people can grow. And not just grow in the ministry, but there's some kind of personal growth. There's some kind of personal development. Perhaps somebody who's been in charge of it for years might need to step aside so somebody else can grow in that level. Because where people feel stagnant, they'll stop. When people feel like there is no growing, they've met the end of the road, then they'll truly feel like they've met their end of the road and they'll find something else to do. But not just being needed, and not just being nurtured, but also being nourished. You have to feed people something that is going to enrich their spirit and enrich their lives. So creating ministries, and this goes for men, women, and especially youth. You want your youth. Many times the youth feel like even when they're a part of it, they don't feel like they're the part of it. And I know that it's a tough line to walk, because as people who run ministries, you can't just overturn the ministry and be all young people centered. But there are definitely ways in where you pull your young people in your services. I mean, having a teenage praise and worship leader works, and if your teenage worship leader feels needed, I promise you, young people are going to be attracted to the young worship leader. And so, and not saying that it has to just be on a platform. It can be serving in any way. And to be honest with you, most young people enjoy service more so than they enjoy platforms. So creating ministries of service, getting them all involved in ministries of service, getting them organized in grassroots ministries, they will love that. They will love that. So make sure that they feel needed, make sure that they're nurtured, and making sure that they're nourished. And in time, you will have people, they won't just be a part of your ministries, they'll be leading out your ministries. I can speak, now I'm just speaking personally. I stay at Light of the World. I live at Light of the World because I feel like Light of the World needs me. I remember graduating from high school and going to college. I sought out colleges based on what was local because I'm not leaving my church, And so, and in time, you grow from being a drummer to being over the children's ministry, to working the usher boards, to being over the young adults, to being assistant pastor, to, you end up growing and nurturing and nourishing and all these different things. But it initially starts because you feel like there's a need for you. So you have to, if this is a church or if there's a leader listening, you have to make sure you create platforms where people feel needed. As well as it meeting your needs, you have to make sure that first and foremost that you're meeting the people's needs.
Yes, and everything that you spoke to speaks to great leadership.
Right.
And them being open to seeing the personal, spiritual, emotional, mental development of the congregants across the board.
And Miss Charlene, I was listening to, I forget what I was listening to, but they were giving points of leadership. And many times we think of leadership in the form of a boss or a CEO, but the person said, before you lead, you have to listen. And then after you listen, you have to learn. And many times the leaders try to force listening and learning on the people that are following them. But then the leader has no idea on how to lead the people who they haven't been listening to, who they haven't been learning from. And so if the leader can listen, if the leader can learn, it makes leading a lot more easier than we think. A lot of times we're pulling people by the teeth only because we don't listen and learn from our own people. So yeah, it's definitely a key leadership point.
Yeah, one saying that I shared recently was we tend to give people what we want them to have versus giving them what they need. So
right.
Yeah,
right.
Got that. As we wrap up, I want to talk briefly about this conversation that some parishioners, I'm sticking with parishioners in particular, are having between faith and fear. Some are struggling because they know they believe in God, they trust God, they believe that He will, if they get sick, that He will heal them, take care of them. But at the same time, there's still a stifling that's happening. They're still kind of like hesitant or reserved in moving out into the world and definitely back into the four walls. What can you say to those people who are still struggling with that conversation?
Absolutely. Move with discernment. Move with discernment. A lot of times I love that you bring it up, faith versus fear, because a lot of times that's exactly how that's the feeling that rests in our chest, is that if I'm not demonstrating faith, I'm demonstrating fear. Or if I'm not demonstrating fear, then that's what I have to do, demonstrate faith. When it puts us in very dangerous situations in thinking like that, because many people claim they have faith and they're moving too quick, or they're moving without caution, or they're moving without considering any factors. And so you have to move with faith, but move in faith with discernment. Sometimes faith is demonstrated in patience. A lot of times we think faith is demonstrated in go, but sometimes faith is demonstrated in wait.
Yeah.
And God can be saying, wait, and your going is actually a demonstration of a lack of faith in God. Because God can make a way for you sometimes in demonstrating patience. And it is not patience. We sometimes people make patience synonymous with being afraid. But when it says they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, they shall mount up with wings as eagles. This wait is a duality. It's a 2-point meaning word in wait. It is wait, number one, in waiting and stopping and pausing, but it is also waiting and serving. They that wait and serve the Lord. So sometimes waiting and patience is serving the Lord. And in serving the Lord, you will have, the great thing about the text is when it talks about you will renew your strength in waiting, because if you had gone on without waiting, you wouldn't be strong enough for the journey. So sometimes in waiting, you execute the very thing that you need to go,
Yeah.
And so knowing that, having faith in God does not necessarily mean being gung-ho. And many times, faith in God is found through walking with God, walking, not just walking and going, but taking steps. Many times we don't take the time to take the steps with God. I encourage, again, I don't want to give you a lesson, but I encourage the men to number one, when you go with God, you have to, don't stop before you start. And many times we can receive a word, or we can receive something that is so motivating to where we want to immediately go, but the word didn't even take root in our heart yet. We don't even know that word yet. So before you walk in the natural, before you make moves in the natural, you got to make moves in the spirit. You got to become one with that word. You have to become one with truth. And in becoming one with that truth, then faith kicks in, because you're believing in a truth. You're not just believing in something inspirational, but something that's taking root in your heart to where you can move. And you don't have to move in fear, but you move in resting in knowing what you know, in knowing that truth. And so many times in that patience, in that walking with God, not only will it soothe all fear, but it'll actually help us walk in true faith in God.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm supposed to stand up and clap now.
No,
To wave the
don't
flag
clap.
now,
No.
to pass the offering plate now. That was a good word. That's ultimately, that's what I'm saying. That was a good
Yeah, I
word.
appreciate it, Michelle.
And I thank you for sharing that. And I hope that, and I believe that it's encouraging some people who, again, are struggling with, I know how that I believe in God, I trust him, but at the same time, I'm just not feeling led to make that next move yet.
Right.
You know, I've called it a time out for myself.
And I was just about to say, Michelle, I hope people take the time out during this quarantine. Don't let 2020 pass and you just feel like you've been on a detention for a year. You know, one of the great ways to use this quarantine is to really take time with God, you know, and sure, you can sit and study the word all day long, but get outside of the house, take a walk around your neighborhoods as it symbolizes taking a walk with God. Like, you have to be able, sometimes God will put us on time out. Sometimes a quarantine will occur, not for our harm. Michelle, you know me more, you know, I'm not one to preach, you know, doom and gloom. I'm going to find a positive thing in something. Sometimes God will put you on time out for your development. You know, I would hate for us to be on timeout from March until whatever this thing ends. And the only thing we got out of it was I good or bad for not going to church? You know, perhaps you were on timeout for 6 months. Maybe God is calling you to something you have no idea he's calling you to. Maybe God is transforming you in your house. Maybe there's a new vocation for you to do. Maybe there's another ministry, not just a church, but a ministry even within your church. God can be calling you to, maybe I need to serve and help this department out. Maybe I need to do whatever it may be. Be productive with your time. God never has, whenever God sends people into a wilderness, they come out greater. They don't come out worse. God never causes us to be worse, but he causes us, again, to mount with wings as eagles, to run and not faint, to walk and to not be weary. So utilize the quarantine, take advantage of the time, and make sure that by the end of 2020, you're a whole nother individual. Not that there's anything wrong with who you are, but that you're greater, that you're stronger. Strive for strength would be my thing. If you strive for strength, don't just strive to get to the end of it. You get to the end of quarantine, you're not even stronger, but strive for strength so that by the time quarantine is over, you're a stronger person. You're a greater individual. You're stronger in your spirit. You're stronger in the natural. You can do politics and pastoring. You can do all these kinds of things. This is the time to do it. If you're ever going to do it. I think 2020 has been a blessing, not to, you know, belittle the effects of this dangerous virus. But many people needed a timeout. We're living in a world where people stay on the go. People don't even have time for their families. People don't even know who their families are. And during this quarantine, God can cause reconciliation and reunification, even within our own families and our own lives. Miss Charlene, I don't want to talk. So tell me when I'm talking too much.
Well, that's why I wanted you to be here, because I knew that you would have a word.
Yes,
ma'am. And I know that we're in a season.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to hear your voice on this topic. So you're not saying too much. You're right on point. You're on task. You're on time. And I am so glad that you took a few minutes out of being dad, for one thing. I said,
Right. Right. Did you catch that I was hiding in their room?
I did. I did.
Right.
And we saw you on the move, so this is a good thing. And
Yes,
when
ma'am.
we move, so we got to do what we have to do, right?
Right.
Thank you
Right.
so much for stopping by. I hope to see you in person real soon.
Yes, ma'am. And to all your listeners, I just want you to know Miss Charlene is one of the sweetest ladies in the world. I call her this all the time, and by no means am I just saying it. She's one of my favorite people in the world. I love you so much, Miss Charlene.
Oh, I love you more, I think. I don't know. I think I love you more. I love you immensely. You and your
Yes,
family mean so much to me. And again, I'm honored and humbled that you would stop by and to say hey to us and to share your voice on just share your voice, period, really.
It's my pleasure and it's my honor. Anytime. I enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.